Exploration, occupation and settlement of the American continent by the main powers of Western Europe, starting at the end of the 15th century. What was the Conquest of America? The Conquest of America is the process of exploration, occupation and settlement of the American continent by the main powers of Western Europe. It began in 1492, after the arrival of the expedition led by Christopher Columbus to the Caribbean islands, an event traditionally known as the discovery of America. It was initially led by the kingdoms of Spain and Portugal and later joined by France, England, and the Netherlands. Although the native peoples of the Americas tried to resist the European conquest, they finally had to submit to the authority and laws of the invaders. Despite this, there were societies that resisted the occupation of their territories throughout the colonial era. There were also some American peoples who remained outside European domination, in areas of difficult access or far from the main centers of colonization. Characteristics of the Conquest of America. The main characteristics of the Conquest of America were the following. It was initiated by the Catholic kings, 1479 to 1504, who financed and sponsored Columbus' 4 voyages to America, 1492 to 1504. During the rule of their successors, especially Charles I, 1516 to 1556, and Philip II, 1556 to 98, Spain managed to conquer most of America. Spain's main competitor in America was the Kingdom of Portugal, which from 1500 began the occupation of the current territory of Brazil. The delimitation of the territories under the influence of Spain and Portugal in America was established by the Treaty of Tordesillas, signed in 1494. This agreement was systematically violated by Portugal, which gradually occupied territories awarded to Spain. During the second half of the 16th century and the 17th century, France, England, and the Netherlands joined in the conquest of America, competing with each other and trying to wrest territories from Spain and Portugal. The conquest of America was a very complex process, in which it is not possible to recognize successive stages, since exploration, occupation and settlement of the American territories were intertwined and often simultaneous processes. It was a constant process, since, although it was concentrated in the 16th and 17th centuries, it lasted until the 18th century, due to the resistance of different indigenous societies and the incorporation of new states with claims on the territory. Its protagonists were very varied, adventurers and private conquerors who signed capitulations with the kings, religious dissidents, state officials, professional military and religious men and women who sought to evangelize the indigenous people. It was carried out by expeditions arriving directly from Europe or from urban enclaves founded by Europeans, following the models of European cities. The conquest constituted a violent clash of civilizations, after which the world of the native peoples was deconstructed. They were forced to submit to the domination of the Europeans, who imposed their language, religion, and culture, as well as various forms of forced labor and servitude. Causes. The main causes of the conquest of America were the following. The need of the Western European crowns to incorporate new sources of wealth to meet the growing expenses of their centralized monarchies. The scientific and technological advances of the time, such as the compass, the astrolabe and the caravels, which allowed oceanic navigation to the American territories. The demographic expansion of Europe, which demanded natural resources for its economy and food for its population. The technological superiority of the European powers over the native peoples of the Americas. The Europeans had horses, armor, and firearms. The Americans, on the other hand, had a basically lithic technology, spears, bows and arrows, did not know gunpowder and lacked battle animals. The establishment of alliances between the European conquerors and the leaders of the peoples under the power of the great American empires. These alliances were decisive in balancing the number of combatants. The diseases that the Europeans brought to America, for which the indigenous organisms had no defenses. Smallpox, measles, tuberculosis and other infectious diseases caused thousands of deaths and weakened American societies in the midst of the wars of conquest. Consequences. The main consequences of the conquest of America were the following. The loss of independence of the original peoples of America, who had to submit to the authority and laws of their respective metropolises. The disappearance of a large number of American languages, which were supplanted by those imposed by the colonial powers, especially Spanish, Portuguese, English and French. The evangelization of the American peoples, sponsored by the papacy and carried out by different religious orders, such as the Franciscans, Dominicans and Augustinians. In this way, Christianity spread in America, replacing or superimposing itself on local religious beliefs. The importation of African slaves to replace the indigenous labor force, which was drastically diminishing due to the demographic catastrophe caused by the wars of conquest, the diseases spread by the Europeans and the ill treatment resulting from economic exploitation. The spread of miscegenation, as a result of the unions between Europeans and Indians, encouraged by the lack of white women at the beginning of the conquest. The introduction of a large number of plant species, wheat, barley, rye, sugar cane, etc. And animals, cows, sheep, horses, etc., from the European Mediterranean world. The uncontrolled spread of these species produced a substantial change in the agrarian landscape of the American continent. The extraction of gold and silver and the incorporation of American products such as potatoes, cocoa, and corn into world trade had a great impact on the European economy, which experienced great growth during the 16th century and consolidated its transition to capitalism. Protagonists of the Conquest of America. The main protagonists of the Spanish conquest of America were the following. Christopher Columbus, Genoese navigator, leader of the expedition sponsored by Castile that reached America in 1492. He held the positions of Viceroy and Governor-General of the West Indies. Diego de Almagro, Spanish adelantado and conquistador. He participated in the conquest of Peru and was the first European to explore the current territories of Chile and Bolivia. Francisco Pizarro, Spanish conquistador who led the expedition that defeated the Inca Empire and began the occupation of Peru. He was the founder of the city of Lima. Hernán Cortés, Spanish conquistador who commanded the expedition that destroyed the Aztec Empire and began the conquest of Mexico. Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, Spanish conquistador who explored the coasts of Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, California, Paraguay, and southern Brazil. He was the first European to reach the Iguazu Falls.